Hello, welcome everyone. My name is David, Admin Manager at the Pre-Uni New College Head Office. Thank you for joining us for today's Term 2 Education webinar. Today's webinar is to share the updated information about the selective school application process and placement test structure. And also we have two co-presenters tonight. Ms. Kelly Jones and Ms. Nailah An, who will deliver the information about the exam question style in the recent selective school exam. So we have a lot of information to share tonight, so please pay attention to this session. And lastly, we will discuss about how to prepare for the test. Yes. Okay, can you hear me? Is that okay? Okay, so just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the chat box, and we will have time for the question at the end. So, and also we are recording this session. So after the session, you will be able to replay from the same webinar link, and you can catch up any missing part. Okay? Okay, yes. Okay, let's get started. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So, yeah, selective high school placement. This is the very challenging goal for all our students. Yeah. The selective school, which catering the academically gifted and talented students with high potential, and it will make them work together with the same standard, very high standard, and by delivering the special curriculum, selective curriculum, and teaching techniques, they are quite special. And yeah, we can expect some sort of very good study environment. Yeah. So the bright students, highly achieving potential students, they are quite cooperative learners, and they can form social and academic network, yeah, very easily. So yeah, we better try, yeah, and then yeah, let's meet our challenging goal. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's have a look the key dates for the selective school application that will happen from next term. Term 4. Okay. The application will start from term 4. Yeah. Based on this year's, last year's process, I think the application will open 10th October until 14th of November. Yeah. Usually the application will be processed by the school principal. You charge the school principal, so they need to confirm the application detail, you charge the details, and if the selective school unit required to provide the school map, yes, that's another job for the school principal. And then next year, I'm expecting the exam date probably 9th of March, according to last year's exam date. I estimate 9th of March, because from 16th of March, there will be NAPLAN, national test. So probably they will brought forward early March test date. So I guess it will be 9th of March, which is Thursday, week 7 of term 1. The Department of Education hasn't announced the official date, but it will be one of the March date. And usually the outcome will be released in July, maybe mid-July or late July. So this year's outcome will be available soon, next month. So we will find out this year's exam result from our students. So this is the timeline for the Selective School application and placement process. So Term 4 will be very busy day, yeah, supporting our students' Selective School application. So during the application period, yeah, we will try our best to support and to help your child's application to be completed without any problem. If you have any question or difficulty in completing your application, please contact us. Just email me or call me, and then I will help. Okay. Yeah. So in New South Wales, there are 46 selective schools. 48 selective schools. Yeah. 17 fully selective schools and 4 agricultural fully selective schools and 27 partially selective schools. So total number of places for year 7 entry is 4,226. In terms of the competition rate, every year more than 15,000, sometimes nearly 16,000 applicants, students, year 6 students, sit for the exam. That means very high competition. Wow. So to be able to succeed, you should be at least top 30% achievement level in the exam. Yeah. So without any preparation, it will be very hard to get in. So that's why we start from early this year for the exam. Yeah. Okay. Many parents are quite curious about the entry score for each selected schools. So until 2021, last year, they released the official entry mark, minimum entry score for each selected schools, which was out of 300 mark, which is previous score. But from this year, they no longer release any entry mark, which is quite unfortunate. So the only way we can figure out the entry score is just based on our students' outcome. So last year's outcome, we got most of the outcome from our year 6 students, and then maybe this is our estimated minimum entry score for each selected school. As you can see, to get into James Rules, at least 105 out of 120. That's the cutoff mark. Followed by Bocum Hill, 98. Most Sydney Boy, 96. Yeah. So to get into top 10 schools, your child should achieve at least 89 or more, above 90 out of 120 mark, which is a very high score to get in, to achieve. So we need to practice, prepare well in advance, do the practice on a regular basis. Okay? So after this year's outcome, we will have another new data about the new entry scores. Okay? Okay. In terms of the test structure, they introduced a new test format since 2021. So there are 4 sections of the test: reading, mathematical reasoning, thinking skills, and writing. So this is the standard timetable on the exam day. Test 1, reading, 40 minutes. There will be 35 questions in reading test. 30 questions in reading test. And mathematical reasoning will be the second test. 35 questions, still 40 minutes. Thinking skill, 40 questions in 40 minutes. and just one writing task at the end, 30 minutes. So usually they can finish all tests by 12:20. Yeah. So next year on the exam day after 12:30, we will invite our students to come to the head office, and we will try to collect as many information as possible. Next year's year 5 students. Okay. So the placement score would be calculated based on the placement test. So it will be main score to decide the successful or unsuccessful outcome. So they introduced a new out of 120 marks, previously out of 300, but now out of 120 marks. So usually the English part is the biggest portion, 50%, and mathematical reasoning and thinking skills same 35 each. So altogether 120 marks. Yes. From this year, the Department of Education said they no longer release the placement score. So we won't be able to find out exact score, but we can see the new test performance report, the individual test report that contains the students' position in the candidate group for each test component. So we will see how it goes. Yeah. Okay, so if you have any questions, just leave your message in the chat box and I will have a look later. Okay. Okay, so now is the most important part. Yeah. Now we'd like to provide more detailed information about the question style and how to study. So for the reading test, I'd like to invite Mrs. Kelly Jones. Hello, Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, David. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Yeah. Okay, it's your turn. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, good evening, everybody. My name's Kelly Jones. I am an English teacher, and I've been doing that for about 15 years and working as a curriculum advisor as well for quite a number of years now too. So this evening, I would like to give you some summaries and tips and tricks about the reading test for the Selective Schools test, and some really practical ideas about what students can do to be able to prepare for that part of the test, which we know is such a significant element. So over about the next 10 to 20 minutes, I will cover the renewed focus for the selective test as per the Department of Education's 2018 review, an overview of the main reading comprehension skills that you can expect to find in the test, types of the reading questions and how to identify what type of question you're being asked and how to answer it, and then a little bit on managing the test time at the end, because that is such a critical factor as well. Okay, so David did mention a little about the selective test and selective schools and what their part is in the scheme of education. So really, the selective schools and OC classes are targeting high potential students. What the 2018 review showed was that at times the students were not always being treated. Oh, well, no, I shouldn't say that. The test wasn't always equitable for all students, and it could be skewed by certain types of privilege. So the new style of questions and testing aims to remove that and therefore improve equity for every student sitting the exam. There's three, essentially, groups of students that the selective school system is targeting. The first one is students with very high potential. So that is potential that exceeds students of their same age group. And these students are looking for a far more enriched and extended curriculum. So, the test is targeting high potential students, also what we refer to as gifted students. So they significantly exceed the ability of students the same age, and they typically master skills like a lot quicker than same age peers. And then the third group targeted by the selective test is highly gifted students, and those vastly exceed students of the same age. So no matter which one of these categories any student may fall within, the point is that being able to practice the skills of critical thinking is essential for life in general, but particularly if you would like to be successful in the selective system. And those are skills, critical thinking skills, that you can actually learn and become better at. So whilst we can't necessarily change things like, IQ, you can train things like memory and executive control and being able to boost, intelligences in that way. So yeah, that's what training and practice can really achieve for the students. Now, in terms of the selective test reading section, as David did mention, it is 30 questions and it's in 40 minutes. So that's a really short amount of time to be able to navigate not only all the questions, but of course the reading material itself. The questions are based on a broad range of texts. So they will be targeting different purposes as well. For example, there will be persuasive texts, informative texts, entertainment texts. And then within those purposes, you can expect to see a lot of different text types, like, everything from essays, speeches, through to poetry and information reports, etc. The list is not exhaustive. So on the screen now, you can see a list. Now, this is just the main types of reading comprehension skills that students would be assessed on, and you can see finding the main ideas, recalling facts and details, understanding sequence. Some of these are what we call lower order skills, or they can be lower order thinking skills. They're not as difficult, but then some more difficult skills to be able to master are things like making inferences or being able to interpret figurative language, making predictions, comparing and contrasting. So those are the critical thinking skills that are being looked for. In the 2022 selective test, we know there was a wide range of strategies tested, reading strategies tested, and they, of course, came through a range of different text types. So there was a narrative, Call of the Wild, which is quite a sophisticated text, actually, especially for this age group. So that would have been challenging in the sense of reading quickly through what is some, fairly sophisticated vocabulary. Then we had some factual texts, which are a little bit easier to access reading-wise. Those two were compared. There's poetry, which can be, especially challenging for students because it is so reliant on our interpretations and figurative language techniques. Some more informative texts, and then literary texts. There were some extracts based on a few different text types there. So as you can see, it doesn't really matter what purpose or text type the extract is from. The reading comprehension skills and strategies that are being examined remain the same. I'll just touch briefly on the writing as well because it's linked so closely with reading skills. It's only for 30 minutes as well. So often a follow-up question to how can I study for the reading section or the writing section, well, they go hand in hand. So beforehand, what students can do to really master the language, reading fluency and pace, etc., is just to read, and more reading. It doesn't need to be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be very highly sophisticated literary text. It could be simple text like the daily news, or information texts that you could find on, the internet easily through National Geographic or New Internationalist, or anything really. It can even be entertainment texts such as, novels or comics, because there's a lot of visual literacy involved as well. So any of these texts, if you can have your children engage with them for, research suggests around 20 or 30 minutes every day at least, then that will really help both the reading and the writing skills for all students. On the day, of course, there are pressures, and we need to be prepared for how best to face those. So in terms of the writing test on the day, simple things like knowing how to very quickly and skillfully underline the key nouns and verbs in the question to be able to ascertain, well, what is the purpose of the text that I am being asked to write? Who is the target audience? Is there an age group? Is there a cultural group? Is there a gender? What is my objective? Being able to think through that very quickly and then execute it. Deciding which person to write in, so first, second, or third. Often the stimulus may even stipulate which person to write in, or give a starter sentence that students need to follow on from. So if that starts in first person, you need to know to continue in the first person, or at least most likely to do that, because it would make the most sense for the text that you are writing. Practicing how to plan in a short period of time. So there's a lot of things that need to come to mind quickly, not only the content and the ideas, but then also the structure. What is the text type that you need to adhere to, the language, the techniques that would be most suitable, themes, if it's a entertainment text or a narrative type piece, what type of characters or setting or stylistic features. This is a lot. It's a lot for anyone. And I suppose the better prepared and the more practice one has had of preparing for these for this type of test in this type of environment, then the better off you are. Another piece of advice I think is vital is learning how to edit. It's so easily dismissed that we just read through something at the end and that's called editing. It's not. There's a whole skill set around editing. And so, again, being able to practice and experiment with different styles of editing to find what suits each student the best, because every student is different. Every student learns differently. Everyone has different strengths and ways of learning. There's not a one size fits all. Being able to practice, though, means you get a chance to experiment with those different types of strategies and find out what works for you. It's not going to be just download this sample and be able, everyone can follow it. It is very individual, and especially because we're talking about the selective system. Students with gifted thinking abilities are often, quite different thinkers as well, and so it's not going to be a black and white answer to, well, what's the best way for me to study necessarily. All right, we'll just bounce back to the reading comprehension questions. This is the same list that I referred to earlier. I know that when questions are being written, there's careful attention to make sure that a range of skills is being assessed. So, yeah, you can expect to find probably all of these or basically all of these and other reading comprehension skill questions in the selective test, and also any reading comprehension test. If you can read for meaning and understand how language creates meaning, then not only are you a fluent reader, you're also a fluent writer, and that helps to make you a critical thinker. And these are all the skills that we want our students to master. Most importantly is finding the main idea. So the way you can study to do this is to look at a broad range of texts, as I've said, and then ask yourself, well, what is the passage mostly about? Know where to go to in the text to find that information. So the title would be a dead giveaway, or the heading, the topic sentence. If there are subheadings, for example, being able to scan the text or skim and scan through the text first also is an important skill, because very quickly you can ascertain what the main idea. There's always questions about the main idea, and the main idea questions link to other questions, especially in the comparing and contrasting sections. Recalling facts and details, really important. Again, we're under time constraint. So some students tell me, oh, I find it difficult to remember all the information that I've read. I read the passage and then I go back to the questions and I can't remember everything that I've read. Completely normal. Again, there are skills and strategies that they can practice, like highlighting key nouns, verbs, ideas as they read through the text, knowing to look at the first sentence, the beginning of the text, the introduction, the orientation, looking at the end, paying particular attention to the final sentences or a conclusive statement, seeing the text as a whole. So again, that's another sort of scanning technique that means you don't have to remember every single word that you read, but you can be ready to find the main points. Also, techniques like reading the questions first. That way you know what you're looking for. It's not, a guess about what might be coming up. You definitely know, well, this word or this phrase or this simile or metaphor is going to be in the question. So I will focus on that when it comes to me in the text. Understanding sequence. So being familiar with a range of different text types and how they are structured. Every text has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And looking for signal words that help to, again, locate those parts very quickly, like first, then, later, after, before. Prepositions as well in the text, good to practice. Recognizing cause and effect. I think that one is quite straightforward. It's really just being able to understand why something happened, for what reason. Comparing and contrasting. This is one of the more challenging skills, and it's at least in the past been the first section of the reading test, where there is two texts, and sometimes they're similar in content or theme, or not at all. They might be similar because they're written in the same person or similar settings. You can never predict what the similarities or differences might be. However, you can almost bet that there will definitely be a text that is compared with another one. So being able to find the likenesses and the differences, and also because it's multiple choice, there are whole skills around being able to answer multiple choice questions, right? Sometimes it's not about finding the right answer necessarily, but finding the most correct answer. There could be 4 options that are all correct in some way or another, but being able to discern, well, this is the most correct answer, and being confident about how you've established that from the text, that's really important. I think sometimes students can jump to a conclusion and think, yes, that's the right answer, and tick it or circle and move on. But it's so important to know how to answer multiple choice questions. There are very often more than one correct answer, and you are looking for the most correct answer. This comes up very commonly with comparing and contrasting questions. Making predictions is another time-saving skill. So you can make predictions about what's going to come in the text, but then also there is going to be some higher order questions. Remember, we're looking for really gifted and high potential students that think outside the box, ahead of themselves, and in different and critical and interesting ways. So there can be questions that the answer is not necessarily in the text at all. It's about what might happen outside of that text. So using general knowledge, having the confidence to be able to do that is one thing. Having read a lot of different texts and having a broad general knowledge across a lot of different text types and different subject matters can make this much easier as well. Again, read, read, read. I'm going to say it again and again. But this helps to find word meanings in context. There will be words in the test, no doubt, that the student has not seen before. That's totally okay and, you know, most likely intentional. So how do you find out what does it mean? Well, you look for the words around it. You find the word in the sentence, and then you can not guess, but have an educated guess about what that word might mean. Knowing what role it's playing. For example, is it a verb? Is this a noun? Is this an adjective? That can help to be able to figure out, well, what does this word mean in context? There are, in my experience, usually always vocabulary questions as well. And sometimes the test isn't, well, do you know all the words? Of course you don't. No one knows every word in the English language. I don't think they do anyway. There may be someone out there. But reading the dictionary is not the best technique. Reading a wide range of texts and understanding what words mean in context is the best way to target that. One of our higher order critical thinking skills, as I mentioned, is making inferences. So this means inferential knowledge or inferring information. You need to use clues from the text to be able to figure it out then on your own. So it's not going to be what we call explicitly in the text. It will be inferential information. This is probably the most important reading skill, not of all time, but for these types of tests, because it's easily used, really. It's easy to write inferential questions and it requires critical thinking. So, yeah, again, wide reading and practice helps. Distinguishing between facts and opinions, that's pretty straightforward. I think all our kids can do that. You know, just knowing what is biased, the difference between subjective and objective information. And that also then draws back to the author's purpose, whether or not they have an agenda. Are they motivated for a particular reason to persuade for one way or another? Yeah, so the author's purpose, again, that links really closely with the text types. Not always, though. For example, like a speech could be informative, it could be entertaining, it could be persuasive, it could be a little bit of all three. It's not always just cut and dry. An essay is informative. No, there are definitely persuasive essays. There are definitely essays that have entertainment value. So, you know, it's finding the main reasons why the text was written and then looking, a bit more deeply past the surface and understanding the context that text was written within and whom for. And then figurative language, this one comes up a lot in regards to the poetry section. Every test so far has had some form of poetry extract or a complete poem in the test. So knowing what the figurative language techniques are, simply the ones you'd be most familiar with are like metaphors and similes, etc. But then knowing some of the other sound techniques like alliteration or rhythms, onomatopoeia, that's sometimes there. So just being familiar with what those figurative language techniques are, that's great. That's one thing. But then what meaning do they create? That's the more important part. What meaning is created? What is the point? You know, how is meaning being created through this language device? It's not an accident. It's very intentional, the way the author has used language, and that's what we really want to get down to. And then lastly is summarizing. This really links closely with the main idea of the text. So being able to summarize, the question might ask you, what is the best summary, you know, or how does this, or which one of these statements best summarizes the text? So really just knowing to look for the main ideas again and being able to deduce very quickly and knowing where to go to in the text to find that information is very useful. Okay, my last point is about time management. Again, in my experience, students do voice often that they felt very rushed for time, or that they didn't get a chance to read as closely or as deeply as they wanted to. So how do you address that? Well, you practice reading. That's what you do. You practice reading every day or almost every day until forever. That's my advice, my English teacher advice. I know it's not always practical. We have to live life as well. But really, reading and being exposed to a wide range of texts is the #1 way to be able to improve fluency, language acquisition, vocabulary, understanding context, general knowledge, all of the above. As well as that, though, there will be questions that you might find too difficult, or not too difficult, but more difficult than others. So what do? Well, you don't spend too much time on it. You don't just get stuck there. My advice is always to move on. Just move on, choose the one that you think best, and then come back to it later if you've got time, or if you don't, at least you've had your best guess, educated guess at the time. There's no time warnings during the test. No one's walking around telling you, touching on the shoulder, you've got 2 minutes to go, or anything like that. So it's important to be able to practice the test or be familiar with the format in that time frame. Even setting like an alarm or whatever is useful. So I guess, being very familiar with the format of the test is very useful for students, so that they are not surprised on the day. And then that also helps to reduce the anxiety, because it is a big deal and it is a lot of pressure, and they're only very young people. So we do want to make sure that they don't feel overwhelmed, and that the anxiety they have is, a bit of positive nervousness and not debilitating because of the pressure of the test. So yes, that's my spiel for today. I believe these slides will be available for you later. And if you have any further questions, you can write those to David, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Thanks, David. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Informative presentation. Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Miss Nailah An, and she will deliver very informative information about thinking skill and mathematical reasoning test. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Really, it is lovely to be a part of this year's seminar. My name is Nailah, and I have been a part of Pre-Uni's team as a teacher, and have been involved in a variety of aspects, such as teaching, being a part of a variety of webinars such as this one, and also doing various video lessons. And so I've been quite involved doing a lot of the trial test part of the courses in teaching here, as well as the WEMT. So today I'll be presenting on mathematical reasoning and thinking skills test information. Now, on the next slide, I'll be going through specifically what exactly thinking skills and mathematical reasoning involves. So today's contents of today's webinar involves what is mathematical reasoning, what are the problems students are facing that we've realized through our time while students are doing their trial test, and some tips that you as a parent or students, if you are listening, can help to improve the overall mathematical reasoning. And also the similar thought processes in thinking skills. What exactly is thinking skills? The types of thinking skills questions, and what are the problems students are facing, and some tips based on that. Okay, so and then at the end, maybe if we've got time, a bit of questions and answers. So let's begin. Mathematical reasoning. What exactly is mathematical reasoning? So from a few years back, we've known within both OC and Selective, our test component for math was just mathematics. But now with the new test structure change, they've changed this to something called mathematical reasoning, which is not all too different, but it is definitely another level increase from mathematics. So mathematical reasoning is that critical skill that enables a student to make use of all of their mathematical skills. It doesn't just involve mathematics as a knowledge of like your number concepts and your formulas, but it involves being able to look at a problem, be able to solve that problem that involves a variety of mathematical concepts. So within mathematical reasoning, it really focuses on evaluating situations, selecting problem-solving strategies, drawing logical conclusions, developing and describing solutions, as well as recognizing how those solutions can be applied. Now, in terms of developing, describing solutions, yes, we are doing, the selective test is a multiple choice based test. However, it involves us to be able to know those processes and conclusions and solutions to be able to get to those answers. So still very important aspects that mathematical reasoning tests upon. So now we are going on to our next point, which is what is the difference between math and mathematical reasoning? Well, mathematics, like I've mentioned just before, is the knowledge of formulas and mathematical concepts. But mathematical reasoning uses reasoning and mathematical concepts to solve that problem. So on the next slide, I'll just show you an example of what's the difference between the two. So if you have a look, the difference between math and mathematical reasoning. Up above here, we've got our mathematics question, which is, you can see it's a simple question involving BODMAS that involves multiplication, addition, and division. And overall, what steps do you need to do first? And so we would know that we would do our multiplication and division first, followed by our addition. But down below here, we've got our mathematical reasoning question. And you can see here that there's a situation where Chris rides a Jeep at a steady rate to the market and walks to home at a different steady rate. So you can see here that riding on a Jeep and walking home is already two different rates of time travel. And so you can see that both those times take different times, and we have to be able to solve, have knowledge in time and measurement, but also be able to work with number to be able to solve that. So seeing now that we've just gotten into a bit of an introduction about what exactly mathematical reasoning questions are, these are some problems that I've noticed and that other teachers have definitely noticed that we really want to bring forward to our students to be able to really understand, know that they've got these, that this is an overall issue, and how exactly can we fix this up, okay? So if we have a look at issue number 1, students do not have a strong concept of number and the basic 4 operations. So as you can see, what we mean by this is the basic 4 operations and concepts of number involve multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, fractions, percentages, decimals, and representations of numbers overall place value. Now, students may have somewhat of a knowledge, but they need to be flexible and fluent in being able to work with a variety of numbers. So in terms of multiplication, you might know multiplication, but do you know how to use multiplication when working with percentages? Do you know how to use multiplication when working with decimals, in terms of fractions and so forth like this? And so as you can see here, these are 2 examples of questions from the selective test previously. And you can see here that we've analyzed it and seen that, yes, the category of question is number in this case, and number knowledge and description of fractions. But you can see here that there's a lot more involved to be able to solve this question. It isn't just, oh, you've got to, the question says to add or multiply. It's asking you to delve in further, write out your working out properly to be able to solve it. And you can see on this example question here, you can see the category is measurement and algebra, but you still have to use number to be able to solve this. And so you can see how important it is to really know your number concepts. So how do we actually solve this problem? And a tip that we give is ensure students are at that mastery level in number concepts and in mathematics. So that involves your 4 operations. multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Know when to use them. Know the when brackets are involved, how do you actually use brackets within there? And your various numbers and their representation. So in terms of fractions, decimals, percentages, those and ratios, that's all these things are representations of numbers, but knowing how to use them and exactly how they relate to each other is really important. Now, that can be really honed in on, but what's really important is also being able to solve those numbers, many problem-solving questions, as well as that combination of mental math. So mental math is just that quick math, and you can see in our WMT course, our math has always those quick questions, and so timing yourselves with that, and then working through those like a variety of problem-solving questions as well. Now, let's have a look at issue number 2. So issue number 2 is that students do not have the basic concepts of mathematical substrands such as measurements, data, and statistics. So within our mathematics, if you have a look at the New South Wales syllabus, we focus on 3 strands. We've got number, we've got measurement and geometry, and then we've got statistics and data and statistics. And so, yes, we need to have a strong sense of number because it's our umbrella term, but we also have to know our measurements and our data and statistics that's within there. And so you can see here that sometimes some students don't know how they work together and how number and, well, in terms of like measurement and statistics, how they, like the formulas with that as well. So it's really important that students do have that knowledge. Now, how do we conquer that? Well, we need to ensure that students know the foundational knowledge of all substrands of mathematics, such as measurement, data, and statistics. So this involves know the formulas, such as for perimeter, area, and volume. A lot of the times, and not only just knowing those formulas, but being able to apply that as well. So things like we've seen a lot in the past about areas of circles, volumes of cylinders, volumes of perimeter, all of these things, of pyramids, my apologies, all of these things are crucial, and because this is all to do with gifted and talented, they're expected to know these, know how to use this flexibly and fluently throughout the paper. And so that's one thing, and make sure that you work with various problems involving these concepts. And so you can see that within our mathematical reasoning questions, there's going to be those 1 or 2 really tricky questions, and that's how they start to distinguish between those students that are really the top tier and those who are a little in the middle. And so it's really important that if you want your child to be part of that top category, top tier, that they are familiar with all of these concepts. All right, issue number 3 is that students do not understand the purpose of the questions or sometimes misread the question. So a lot of the times, yes, we do sometimes see it as a silly error or a simple mistake, but within the selective, we cannot afford to be able to go make these silly or simple mistakes. And so these things have to be practiced upon as well, which means really looking at that main question. You can see in this example question, we are looking at measurement data, classification is compass bearing problems, and you can see the question has 3 different sentences. Frank was facing east, so that's your starting point. He turned 53 degrees clockwise. Clockwise is your key word there, 53 degrees clockwise, knowing what the word clockwise means, and 98 degrees anti-clockwise. Now, the main question is actually this here, the last part. What compass direction is he facing, is he now facing? So a lot of the time, some students get confused and they focus on the wrong parts of the question. You can see that even within this question here, there's 3 sentences, and you need to be able to know that what exactly is the end result I need to get to. So a tip, how do we actually ensure that students don't misread questions? Well, we need to ensure students can identify the purpose and the main question. So that involves identify the main pieces of information necessary to solve the question. Do not be distracted by extra information given in some questions, and underline or highlight the question. Now, yes, if the style of the format of the selective test is online, then through computer, then it might be hard to underline the question and so forth. But that's where we still have available working out paper to be able to access and take on these tips to be able to do this. Okay, so let's move on to issue number 4, and that involves students are taking shortcuts in their working out. So I see this a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other teachers do see this as well. Yes, we know that students are can be quite confident in their calculations and things, but we always, because of that pressure that students have during that time limit as well, they tend to make a lot of mistakes. And so what's really important is being able to write out that working out and not take those shortcuts, because everyone is prone to errors. And so it's really important that not only to be able to refer back to your working out or back to your questions when you're checking again, but it's important to actually have that all written out just in case, because you never know what silly error you've made. And so countless of times when we go review through in our STTC courses or anything, when we're marking, students go, I should have gotten that question right. And then when they look back, they're like, oh, I made a calculation error here because I did it in my mind. So really important about these things. Now, how do we hone in and fix this? Well, we need to ensure that students are writing out the necessary working out with precision. Make sure that you organize your information into number sentences. A lot of the times we might get stuck on a problem-based question, which has a very long question. It's like a whole paragraph, and we might be confused about where to start. Well, to help cater this, what I find really good as a starting point is writing that information into a number sentence, because that will help get the brain churning, being able to see how it equals to one thing to another. So that's really one important, really good tip. The second one is to make sure you organize your information into tables or graphs if necessary. Not always necessary, but a lot of the times when you can see how each part of information connects with one another, it makes it a lot easier to see. And number 3 is working out should be organized and clear so you can actually easily refer back to it. A lot of the times when we see students finish and they just sit there, that's a waste of time. They need to make sure that they go back, they check their answers, and they go back. And to be able to effectively go back means to be able to look back at their paper, their working out of that particular question, and just make sure they haven't made any errors within there. So that's what we mean by checking back, not just flicking through and just saying yes, 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 but really being able to solve those questions again really quickly through your mind because you've already done the calculations. All right. So those are the main 4 tips that we give. And of course, there's so many more possible issues that students can face, but these are probably the most outstanding ones that we advise to students that you try and really work on. Okay, let's move on to thinking skills. So first of all, what exactly is thinking skills? Well, when defining the term thinking, this can be seen as a flow of ideas. I mean, we're always thinking on the go, whatever we do. However, we've got to be careful with this. Everyday thinking can be defined as surface level thoughts, but this is not thinking skills. For example, if I'm asked if I would like tea or coffee, no effort is needed for that answer because it's a quick question and a quick thing that I can think about straight away. Thinking skills is actually it's a skill that requires higher order thinking, and there are a variety of components and skills required to applying that. And so these skills include critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, computational thinking, ethical reasoning, and metacognition. So you can see that thinking skills is quite a broad umbrella, and there's so many different skill sets that you can see within there. Okay, so now that we know that, let's have a look at the different types of thinking skills questions. Within Selective and within our New South Wales Selective, we focus on 2 main thinking skills and components, such as problem solving and critical thinking. Now, they're quite different, and we'll show you what the difference is. The first one is the types of problem-solving questions involve the finding procedures, and these are the different number concepts or mathematical concepts that are involved with it. Identifying similarity, so making use of those statistics and graphs, and relevant selection, so having a look at your different graphs, number concepts, and so forth. Okay, now having a look at the other component of thinking skills is your types of critical thinking questions. So that involves applying principles, assessing the impact of additional evidence, detect reasoning errors, drawing conclusion, identifying an assumption, identifying the main conclusion, and matching arguments. And even within there are different types of questions. So critical thinking is quite broad as well. Now, what are some problems students are facing, and what are the tips that we can give to help fix this? The first issue is that students are unfamiliar with the various types of thinking skills questions. So just like in our previous slides, we've just seen a whole variety of different thinking skills questions, both within problem solving and critical thinking. And so what's really important is the more, and we can always say this, practice makes perfect. And the more we are familiar with these types of questions, the better we are at it. And so you can see within here, these are two very different questions, but these questions come up a lot. These detect reasoning error questions, once we're familiar with the structure of it and how exactly to solve it, we definitely become a lot more better at it. And so being familiar with these types of questions is very important. Now, a tip to be able to hone in on this is to ensure that students are familiar with the many types of questions. So, like I've just said, continuous exposure and practice to the various question types. We can see that within here, yes, not only your selective trial test course within the thinking skills component, you're exposed to those questions, but there are a mixture of different randomized questions of different categories. So students might not be able to gain very mastery skills by solving that one question. But within our WMT course, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with it. In the thinking skills component, every week we go through different types of questions, and there's that practice, 10 question practice that they get, explanation of the question, how exactly we solve it through a flow chart, and tips on solving those as well. But not only that, online every weekly, we've got that 5 questions as well. So that's an important thing. And one thing that we've noticed is that thinking skills, right now, the bank of questions that we have is quite a rarity that we see overall. There's not many of them available. And so what we offer at Pre-Uni, we can see that there's a variety that we can use to be able to solve them. Knowing the different strategies to solving these questions is an also really important point. And once you get used to seeing, okay, strengthening question, I need to first identify the main idea. And then I need to look through my options and categorize what type of option it is. Is it an irrelevant statement? Is it a strengthening, weakening? And knowing those strategies is very important. Okay. Having a look at issue number 2. Issue number 2 is that students do not know key critical thinking skills vocabulary. Now, this vocabulary, I've just listed here a whole variety of questions, the critical thinking skills vocabulary that's always pops up in our questions. But a lot of the times we notice that students don't actually know what these words mean. So words like assumption, flaw, strengthen, weakening, hinders, conclusion, reasoning, statement, intended supports. Really important that we know the vocabulary of each of these questions, each of these words, and simplifying it to words that we're more familiar with. So in terms of words like strengthens, I know that strengthen is a synonym to the word supports. It means to agree. But weakening is an antonym to that, and weakening means to disagree. So being able to bring it back to simple vocabulary that we're more used to is quite important. And so highly recommend you know and 100% know these questions, these words. Now, how do we know? Tip, for this is to ensure students thoroughly understand each key vocabulary term. So as I've mentioned it before, know your synonyms, your antonyms, simple definitions of it, and how does it exactly apply in thinking skills questions. Really, like we always say, we might know the formulas in mathematics, but how do we actually use them, and how does it relate to the question is really important. Okay, issue number 3 is that sometimes students are not strategic with the time frame. So we know that there are 30 questions in 30 minutes, and that means that if you work at the math of that, that's only 1 question per minute. And so that's not a lot of time. And so what's really important is being able to be strategic with your time and know that you can't be spending 5 minutes on 1 question. That's a waste of time. Why? Because each question is only worth 1 mark. And so there's no point in being able to solve that 1 difficult question when you're losing time at the end. And so very important about being strategic. And we notice that students can be strong. We can give them the most amount of time, like an hour, 2 hours, and they'd be perfectly be able to solve them. However, when it comes to under pressure within 30 minutes, that's when they start to make those silly mistakes. And that's when we see, okay, this is where they need more work on. So tip number 3, as we said, be strategic with your time. Each question is worth 1 mark. It would be better to be able to spend 5 minutes on 5 questions rather than 5 minutes on only 1 question. And so as a student and parents, if you could say this to your to your children, be strict with your time when solving through questions. If you're going to be resolving those 10 questions that we give, that we allow through to re-review at home, work 10 questions again, work those 10 questions again in 10 minutes. And just so that you're used to and familiar with that working under pressure, being able to, and overall being, honing in on your skills with that. And so that's a lot of processing, analyzing in that short time frame. Okay, issue number 4 is that students are not using process of elimination when working through critical thinking type thinking skills questions. It's quite wordy, but basically, we know that in thinking skills in our test, we've got 2 different components. We've got our critical thinking and we've got problem solving. Now, in our critical thinking, there is definitely a lot of, a whole chunk of information and a lot of information given in order to be able to solve that 1 question. Now, what's really important is that once we digest and really understand those questions, we need to look at our 4 options. But what we've noticed is that students will look at 1 option and they'll say, yes, that's the one, and they'll choose that one. However, sometimes the question is like, which option most supports this paragraph, or the main idea of this paragraph. That means that there's going to be 2 or 3 options that are possible, but we need to choose the one that most supports that. And so even with this one, it's verbal data processing questions, which means we have to actually do the working out. But you can see all these statements are very different. We need to go through each statement and analyze why that one could be right and why that one could be incorrect. And I know with the time constraints, that could be tricky. So really important to be able to get that practice, because practice makes perfect, to increase your fluency and time with these types of questions. Now, how do we solve through this, or how do we hone in and perfect this or fix this mistake, this issue, is to accurately and carefully eliminate through each of the options when looking at critical thinking questions. So for example, like we said, as I've always referred to our strengthening or weakening questions, we've always got 4 options. Now, 2 of our options are always going to be supporting. They're going to be very similar. One of them is going to be totally irrelevant, and one option is going to be against the argument. What's really important is maybe writing like a key few things on each of them to be able to just remember, okay, this one was supporting, this one was weakening, this one was irrelevant, and this one also supports, but this one most supports the main idea of the paragraph. So really important to be accurate and really carefully eliminating through each of those options. Okay, issue number 5 is that students do not have a wide knowledge of general knowledge of general knowledge overall. So within critical thinking, we have what's really important is to be able to see those worldly issues and build up our knowledge on there. A lot of the times what we've noticed in our critical thinking questions is that these worldly issues and these questions involve a lot of artificial intelligence, a lot of health questions, social issues that are experienced around the world, even to do with history. So having that wide variety of general knowledge is a key critical point. And yes, although it's not necessary to 100% know this, it's still very, if students are familiar with these topics, then it becomes a lot more easier to be able to understand and to be able to solve this question. Because I'll give you another example question, or actually, let me first talk about the problem solving. So even within problem solving questions, being familiar with how a deck of cards work, looking at the rules of games, things like tennis games, games to do with scissors, paper, rock, and to do with patterns as well. So we can see here that I can give you an example. There was once a question to do with tennis, and it was to do with being able to understand how a tennis match works and how a player wins the match. And so in the end, if you had that background knowledge of how tennis and the game of tennis works, then you'd be able to understand all that information really easily. On the other hand, if you had no idea about how to play tennis, how the system of tennis works, then you would have a lot of trouble being able to understand that. Another key example was like billiards, to do with like those balls and hitting them, what ball comes first, how many points that goes with, and the rules of the game within there. So you can see how it's like all general knowledge and worldly issues that are important, and if you're more familiar with it, it becomes easier to solve these questions. So how do we build on that and build on this? Make sure you have that key overall general knowledge in a number of areas of fields. And how do we do this? Well, make sure that you read a variety of newspaper articles. Make sure you're up to date with what's happening around the world. Watching documentaries, news reports, doing your own research as well. If you're curious about something, go for it. Go and research about what that actually entails and build that general knowledge that you have. And make sure that you're listening to podcasts and interviews. And so really important to do that. All right, having a look at issue number 6 is that students do not have enough exposure to a variety of questions to solve these questions within the time limit. And so what we like, this question really, or this issue really blends in with our other issues in terms of time restraints and being unfamiliar with the types of questions. Is overall, you have to be familiar and you have to be able to try out and practice a variety of questions. And so you can see here that this is an example of our thinking skills book that we do at WEMT. And you can see on the left that there are a lot of different like you can see here that there's information about the type of question, the tips, and how you actually solve these questions. And so you need to be able to have that practice, that constant practice with it. Okay, now issue 7. So before I go through tip number 6 and 7, that's going to be blended in. So I'm just going to quickly go through issue number 7, which is that students are sometimes not believing the thinking skills question logic for that situation, and sometimes these situations are a bit funny. They don't reflect society in real life. So what we mean by that is that in real life, this is the way the world works. Society works like this. But sometimes our thinking skills questions don't involve that, and sometimes they go the opposite or they go another way. And so what's really important is to be able to discern and know when to use our knowledge of society and real world, and when to be able to follow the logic of the question. So an example is this: an ant is larger than a bus and a bus is larger than a galaxy. We know that that's not true at all. But if a shoe is larger than a galaxy but smaller than an ant, which is the smallest? And so you can see here that in society, in real life, we definitely know ants are not larger than a bus or a galaxy. And so being able to know, okay, I've got to use my logic I've got to believe that this is true in here. This logic is true in this question, but I know in real life that's not the case. I think there was another example of a question to do with, can't remember now, to do with traffic lights. And there was this one situation where in real life, the traffic light, the yellow sign is to go through or to know when to stop as a warning. But in this thinking skills question, that was not the case. So really knowing those differences. Okay. Tip. So a tip for 6 and 7 is to ensure that students get enough practice in solving a wide range of questions in a set time frame. So 10 thinking skills questions of different types to solve within 10 minutes. Very important. And as we always say, make use of all resources available to you. Like we said, thinking skills is a very new concept for Selective. And we know that although thinking skills has been around and as we know, our test provider at Cambridge has this all covered, but usually in previous years that was only for like medical, to get into like medicine and law in university, but now they're using it within Selective and OC. So really important and there's not a lot available to cater for our young students of year 4 and year 6. So making use of all those resources that are available to you, going online to do those questions that are available on Pre-Uni for WMT, those 5 questions, and as well as taking that chance to review your STTC thinking skills questions and mathematical reasoning questions that your child got incorrect. Really important. And whenever I ask and I remind students every week to make sure they review, a lot of them say, no, we haven't reviewed. And that may be the reason why they haven't improved as much. So really important that you take on all of this if you really want to get into that selective school. All right, so that is the end of what my spiel to do with mathematical reasoning and thinking skills. Hopefully that was informative and everyone's gotten something out of it. I'll hand it back to David now.
Thank you, Nailah. What a great presentation for our parents. Yeah. So I'm quite sure our parents got very valuable information about the thinking skills and mathematical reasoning test component. Okay, so yes, I'd like to emphasize the importance of continuing our course for the remaining period. Yeah, we got heaps of successful story from our year 5 and year 6 students about the OC and selective school placement. And we are waiting for another successful story this coming July. So please follow us and get our feedback, get our suggestion and advice. And we are here to help you for any matter academically. If you have any difficulty or concern, yeah, we are ready to support you. So the most important thing is your commitment and your motivation to get through this hard work and challenging task. So please encourage your child to keep up with current, the diligent and good study pattern. Then we will make a very good result next year. Yeah. Okay. So yes, your motivation is very important. Yes, and we are ready to help you. So mainly year 5, we start the selective school exam preparation course early this year with the WMT and STTC. And we are also utilizing the holiday period, yeah, last autumn and coming winter. And most important holiday period will be summer holiday, which is a long holiday. And we will make use of all the available period so that they can feel more confident in the real exam. And also we are planning to have the special testing event like ASAP. So yeah, we have packed up program to provide our year 5 students the effective coaching for the exam. Yeah. So yeah, the winter holiday course enrollment is due by this Saturday, and you can get the maximum discount or the discount. and all the courses and material will be focusing on revising all the important exam topics and lots of practice. And yeah, so and then term 3, yes, STTC, yes, STTC will start from term 3. There is no STTC in winter. So please make use of winter holiday period for the new term study, and just just relaxing during the holiday. That's fine, but we need to start again without worrying about the warming up period for the new term. So please make use of winter holiday time. Yeah. Okay, and our WMT course, yeah. So we will have more great emphasis in reading and thinking skills in term 3. Yeah. So we've done extensive research, and all the WMT modules are revised and developed to reflect the test question, exam style questions. So that's why our year 6 students will have a very good result every year. Yeah. Okay. And the SPTC, working through the practice question and understanding the mistake is the best way to prepare for the test without any problem. Okay, so try our revised SPTC test question on a regular basis and become more familiar with the test format and style of the questions. Okay. So and also I'd like to emphasize the importance of using the cyber school services or available services for WMT and also STTC. As Nailah already mentioned there, please don't forget the weekly review services for STTC, the thinking skill and mathematical reasoning question review. And also we are providing additional reading test, writing retest, and also the poem annotation guide video. Lots of resources you can use during the course. And also today I'd like to announce the good news about STTC session during winter, because there is no STTC practice during winter. So we will offer you the one set of the selective trial test practice during winter, and we will open the registration from tomorrow and for the next 5 days, and then during the winter holiday, you will have a chance to attempt the one set of selective trial test, reading, mathematical reasoning, and thinking skills. So how to register? You need to join our Facebook group. We have a special Facebook group to share the information of our latest selective school and OC exam information. So please join our discussion group, selective test and OC test information group. So once you join in, you will find the registration link, then you can register for this free trial test. So it will be available from tomorrow. So you can just refer to the QR code to access the direct link. Okay. No charge. It's a free test for our students. And also during the winter, please make sure your child complete all mathematical reasoning and thinking skill revision tests that will be available online inside the school. During 2 weeks winter school holiday period, they can try 5 sets of mathematical reasoning and thinking skill revision test. It's based on term 2 study in thinking skill and mathematical reasoning, and they can check the understanding, and they can revise all the important topics in thinking skills. So after the test, you can check your result, you can review every single question again. So it's very important before the new term WMT study, they need to fully understand all the module in the thinking skill and mathematical reasoning. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And yeah, we got heaps of questions from our parents. I'm not sure whether if we have enough time to answer all these questions. Let's see. I will just choose some major one, most frequently question first. Excuse me. Yeah, many parents are concerned about school mark. Yes, because they haven't. The Department of Education hasn't announced anything about the placement score calculation yet. So this year, OC, there was no school mark. Last year, Selective, there was no school mark. But after the pandemic, probably they may resume the school assessment score calculation. Yeah. But basically, what they're saying is they will mainly rank the students based on their academic merit, which is selective school placement test exam. So it's subject to change. So probably in term 3, definitely we can find out the official announcement from the Department of Education, whether they will include the school mark or not. If there's a school mark, it will be 20 marks. Out of 120, 20 marks will be the school mark. Yeah. English and mathematics, just the 2 parts, 10 mark each. So I will update next term with another webinar. Information webinar will be available next term as well. And you can find out the latest information again. Okay. Yes, the slide. Yes, the slide will be available to track. Yeah, the webinar slide will be available to check on Cyber School this Saturday. This Saturday, I will post on news section of the Cyber School. Yeah. And also, you can replay the video. Yeah, the webinar is now being recorded, so you can replay later. Yeah. If possible, probably I will try to make a YouTube link as well for you. Okay, and then what time is it now? Oh, it's nearly 6:30. Okay, yeah, it's time to finish. So I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar, and I will update with another information next term, and I will organize the term 3 webinar, which will be probably week 10 of term 3. So I will let you know by email. So thank you very much, and have a great evening, and see you next time. Bye now.